Hi everyone, welcome to PasigoDesign Watercolor Studio. In today's video, I'll be painting a woodland path, and here's the picture. The path is basically a beautiful scene in the forest, and what's interesting about it is the path going into the distance, as well as the trees that are standing next to the path and giving a lot of I guess, contrast to the background and the foreground. So in terms of values, we have some very light values in the back and some light and medium values definitely on the path. And then we get pretty dark on the trees. So we're going to play with that and see where it goes. Now for this picture, for this painting, I'm going to use a limited palette as always when I do my videos. Um, Typically, I should say, I do love to play with paint, so it's certainly not necessarily a thing I do not do, but my go-to, my favorites are the limited palette of three primary colors. And the yellow that I have is Hansa yellow, and blue, Prussian blue, and the red is Pyrrol red. And these are all by M. Graham. Hansa yellow is basically just a Hansa yellow light because it's a PY3. So other paint manufacturers will use PY3 for a color that they call Hansa yellow light. Then they'll also have Hansa yellow medium and Hansa yellow deep. Anyways, but this one is basically just the light version of Hansa. And then I've also laid out two other colors that I'm thinking of throwing in there only if I feel like I need a little bit more dark and I don't want to do my usual dark mixes. It would only really be just to show that on this video, because otherwise I'm always very comfortable to mix a violet by taking my blue and red and making a very nice color there for shadow. All right, so let's get started. I'm looking at the color map here basically on this picture, and I'm seeing a lot of lights in the background, and that's where I'm going to start. I've laid out some watered down pigment over here. It looks a little greenish here, so it's possible I had a little bit of a very slight bit of blue in my brush when I mixed them, but it won't matter because the colors are all going to be yellows and blues together, so lots of beautiful greens. So that works. The pure colors right here on the side, I have an extra dab here if I need to mix more. But bottom line is I did this because it allows me to have liquid pigment to work with. It's easier than if you have to liquefy it every time you reach into your palette. And that's what leads to variations in value within the same area. So this helps me keep it pretty consistent throughout the painting for the first layer. Second layer, I'll may not use these mixes as much. I might use more pure. We'll see. Right now, I'm just looking for the best soft, very light valued base that will basically become my map for the rest of the painting. All right, so let's start. Now, I did not wet my paper, but I could probably just make sure I have lots of water in my brush here and start at the top. I don't want too much yellow. I don't want this to be too bright, but I just want enough to show that there's sunlight back here. Now, again, like I said, you could go with the blue, but if you're using blue, you have to be careful because you don't want your sky to turn basically green. And where you need the green is down here, right? Between right in here, this area is going to be pretty green, but it's a very beautiful yellow green. So let's make sure we get lots of yellow in here. Now the tree, you can paint it over because it will be dark. I'll leave it for now. Most of it, I can do some at the top. I'll leave a little bit down here. And same idea for this tree. Now, this brush holds a lot of paint, and I should say it holds a lot of paint. It also, it's very, um, it's very liquidy when I grab my paints. So if you don't, and that's because of the hair, uh, the natural hair. But if you have a brush that is synthetic, it's very possible that your the amount of paint that you pick up with your brush is not going to be exactly like this. All right, so this is more like a calligraphy type style of brush. Now I've gone all the way down here and I'm looking at the background, and in here I'm seeing that it's a little bit darker. The greens are a bit deeper, so let's just do some of that. Don't have to have it everywhere, but a little bit, and here definitely a bit stronger. So now I'll put more blues in here and in here. And just to make sure there's a variation here, like a light. When I say variation, I mean in terms of warm and cool. So if I want to make that difference here between warm and cool, I make sure this has light by adding more yellow, and this can have a bit more blue. So this becomes the cooler color. And I still want a little bit of that yellow in there because it's grasses, basically little floral shapes, or I don't know there exactly what's in there. But all right, so the tree is going to be painted fairly dark. So I'll just use my brush to soften some of those edges because it'll make it easier to paint around those edges later. But you don't have to. You can leave the tree totally white. You can cover it up because you can see it gets covered anyways again. So there we go. That's done. The rest here, there's still a bit of green, but I'll do it after I do the path. The path has basically some reds and yellows. Now I'm just going to rinse my brush here and grab some of that red, keeping my yellows fairly bright still. Now this color is going to be sort of a very bright orange, and I find that's a little bit too bright. So I will grab some of that blue green that I had, or even some of the blue. It doesn't matter, but you'll see that it makes a big difference. Now there's a lot more grayness to this yellow, but I feel like it needs to be a bit more orange. So maybe something like this, and very light, not a lot of color in there. Now I'll just be basically taking my brush and going like in linear pattern like this. And it's just because by doing this, it allows me to retain some of that light on the path. And let's soften some of that up. So you see what I do here to soften edges? I just basically put some water on my brush, wipe it off so that my brush is still a bit damp. I've still got water in here, but a lot drier. And I just smooth out some of the edges of the color. You don't have to do them all. It's just to give a better sense of a soft gradation. And because we can do some harder lines later, we're not really at the stage right now of this painting to want to do that just yet. In other words, at this stage, no details, just the base. Just the base. And the base is going to drive what you do next, but at the end of the day, you can still make so many changes. Now I'm noticing in here that it was more greens, so let's grab some of that yellow green again. So you can see how, although I'd made two little reservoirs of green, I'm sorry, of the yellow in order to mix my greens, I didn't even use them the whole thing. So It's a small painting, and it goes far. All right, there's pretty much it. We can put a little bit of greens in here if you want, but that not necessary. Right, all right. Now we're going to let that dry, and you can see it bubble, so it's definitely very moist right now. This is not a good idea to go back in here now and say, oh, I think I'll touch that up and put a little bit more yellow here. It's too late for that. Or say, I'm going to start working on the trees, and I'll do the edges of the trees now so they're nice and crisp. And nope, that's not the right time. Your color's going to move into the background and you're not going to like it. If you have, at this point in time, cauliflowers or anything that looks like a weird texture, don't worry about that, because it'll dry, and the colors always dry lighter, and you can assess after it's completely dry, and your second layer will be able to handle a lot of those little irregularities, because we're going to be putting more paint on top of everything that's there. All right, so we'll let that dry, and I'll be back. Okay, so I'm back, and this is dry. I'll start painting the next step, which would be the middle ground, a little bit of the forest area over here in the background. And for that, I'll just wet some of the space first, and it just makes it easier to have that color moving around on the background for you without too many hard edges. And I just want to put a little bit of color here, not a whole lot. Mostly what I will want to do is add some tree shapes. We can do that at this stage, that are more like distant tree shapes. And adding a little bit of variation here, like in certain areas, just a few darker areas, creates interest. And the tree shapes that we can add very lightly, we can add some color into the distance of something that appears to be there but is not quite visible. It's not a strong color, but it is something that exists in space. All right, so let's just keep going here, and we'll be adding some more of that later as well. The foreground here, I'll take that to the next dark green. And what I'd like to do at this point is just add some red to my green, so that I have a better, just a better contrast between those two areas. So this stays pretty light, whereas this one starts to get quite a bit darker, and maybe a little bit more texture in here, because now it's getting closer to us and we might actually start seeing a little bit more variation in those colors. And to be adjusted, of course, as we choose. And if there's too much, then we remove some little areas of light, and then later we'll add more darks as well. So here we also want to add an area of darker color to show a contrast between this area of closer to the foreground compared to what's in the back. Okay, and the red mixed with the color that we had gives us some very interesting shadow colors. So good time to add a few little shadow colors in here. We have something like darks, quite darks in here. That could represent that. And colors moving in towards the foreground here, the foreground path. All right, the next little area of color contrast would be in here. I'm going to use that same grayish basically a desaturated green color. And there's some in here, just continues in here. We can carry that right out into the pathway. And just to give it a little bit of shadow here. We'll be adding some more shadows in here, of course. There isn't a lot of color in here, so we have to be careful that we don't add too much. This is still that area of interest that we want to maintain. So if there's any color, it's just a little bit on the side, and it's really just to make that area feel like it's going into some sort of a point in the distance, because the focus is on this little walkway in a sense. All right, now I can start the trees, but before I do that, I'd like to do some foliage. It'll be easier to do that foliage now than if you wait till you've got the tree trunk in. So I'm grabbing blues and yellows. This is giving me a nice bright green. And I will probably add some reds to this, but first let's just stick to the greens, the blues and the yellows. And I'm going to also wet this area because it just simplifies the color application. Like, we can actually have some hard edges here, but we will try to have some hard edges and some soft edges, a little bit of both. Now I'm going down here in a bit of a diagonal because this is still wet, but I'm okay going in here right now over top that tree that we had done. We're going to lose it, and that's fine, because the overlaps will help us show the shape of the tree in behind. Now, I'm saying that it's okay if wetness on wetness overlaps here because it'll all be texture at this point, and texture of trees that even if you have a cauliflower in here, it won't matter too much. But what we do want to make sure is that we do not go back into it after it really starts to solidify that space. Now you see here's one happening over here, and that'll be okay. It's in the forest. We'll have some trees in here. And in here also, I'd like to put a little bit of that color coming down in here. Now, we don't see that much foliage in the picture, but that's really your choice here, what you want to do. You can put as much as you want, basically. And let's just continue in here. There's some in here. And what I'll do here is grab my bigger brush, and I don't want too many hard edges, so I'll just push this back a bit. Make sure that we have some hard edges and some lost edges. A lot of texture. Connect these two shapes. It makes it a little bit better to do it that way. And we'll let that dry. There's wetness now pretty much everywhere except on the path. So I suppose I could go ahead and do a bit more darkness on the path. Grab some of the red and yellow. Okay. And what I'm going to be doing here is just applying it in a kind of a same thing that I did earlier, just sort of adding colors as we move into the foreground. and leaving some whites. This will go into the tree, so you can get some color in here right away. It won't matter, because this is still all base layers. And back in here, actually, I'm going to grab more of that red and yellow and just maybe make sure that we have some good darkness in here. We will be coming back onto these areas and adding more. But for now, we've just darkened our base, and it's given us some areas that were not covered, some areas were covered again, and so we're building up value. We have a little bit of a cauliflower here happening. Okay, we have some softness mixed with some hard edges. Okay, if some of those are still too hard, you can use a dry brush. So taking all the water off my brush, and I'm going to smooth out some of those areas. And here, maybe we'll wait for that, but here's where you can have some details. We're not going to do it just yet. It's too early for the details. It's so tempting. We always love to do the little details right at the beginning, and it's not the right time. Okay, so we'll let that dry. Okay, I'm back, and this is pretty good and dry. Maybe a couple of spots at the top, but we won't be going there. The next step is going to be to paint the actual trunks. And there's no question that that is one of the fun parts. Well, getting up to this point is not always the easiest to do, but it's because we expect to see results rather quickly, and the results don't come out till we get into the darker layers. Now, what I'm trying to do is make a brown just out of yellow, and a bit of red to give me an orange, and adding blue. So this here brown is a greeny brown. Maybe we'll go with that, or maybe just see what this brown looks like. It's a little lighter, so let's put more red to it. That's a bit browner red. Let's just start with that. Now, I'm not putting any water on right now, but I'll have my brush ready to wet things where I need it. First of all, where I'm going with this is that I painted some little foliage areas here, and I want to retain that. I want it to look like the leaves are kind of cutting over top of the tree trunks. So I'm just going to paint underneath here. And this is a pretty dark brown, even though it didn't look that dark in here. It's actually coming out very dark. So, but it will dry later. So let's just add some water. And make sure that we preserve some of the light on the tree trunk as well. That means I'm just not going to make it as dark on that side. That's all. And I could be varying that color a little bit. See, by adding more yellow to that brown, I'm getting color here that is more like a warmer brown. And then down here, if I want that to look like it's in the shade, then I put blue, and now I get a cooler brown. So same thing here. It's all wet, so I can do this kind of stuff right now. This is basically allowing me to show a shadow underneath the foliage. So that was just adding blue. And because it's a tree and the trunk is going to have a little bit of texture in here, don't need to put a lot, but if you feel like trying that at this point, that's fun. Connecting these two areas here, maybe I have a little bit of a hole here. Okay. The tree continues up here, and we paint around the leaves, right? And maybe here I can put a little bit of, we can add little dots in here to make it look like there's little gaps, little holes in the foliage here. Now, as long as I know that the tree continues in here, then I get that sense of continuity, like the shape that I know I can feel that shape going up into the sky. Same thing here. I'll continue this around these shapes. And this is really the fun part. I have to admit that the first part is more, let's just say, less predictable, and which is more unpredictable, and it's unfortunate because it's how we judge our painting right off the bat, and we can get very discouraged for absolutely no reason, because it's not really the final result, and it's not what it's going to look like after you're done with it. Now, I'm just making these up because that's not showing me anything on this picture. This is really just designing your tree shape as you go along. And everyone is going to see this differently. So there's no point even to try to copy exactly, because what you see will be different from what I see. And that's really important to sort of understand that when we're painting our paintings. It's also what makes you unique as an artist. And so you have to trust yourself to be making some decisions that will be interesting for you, and that you will feel like it's really a result of your creativity. So the idea is to just use the theory and the instruction to help you get there. This, for example, maybe I have a little bit too many areas of light here, but what it is here is that I'm showing the tree edge, not by painting the whole thing, but I'm showing the tree edge by leaving little white spaces and then dark spaces. These, they go to the edge, and this stays a little looser. So I'm going to use my brush here to loosen up some of that color because it's farther into the distance, and so it won't be as dark as here. And you can see already that it's drying and I'm losing that really strong color that I had. So it means I'll have to go back in there and put some more in. Now in the distance, like I said, these are shapes that are not going to be quite as dark as this also. We're going to leave them like that. This one I'll add more, but these I won't. And that's because as things recede in space, they get lighter. And at this point, I pretty much stopped looking at my picture because it's already changed enough now that what's happening in here is really more about how I see it happening. The shapes in the background, we can still make a little bit more color change here. Remember how I said this was going to be the lighter area, lighter green, so we can put a bit more of that green, light green in here just to get some of that variety. I'm not going to touch that because it's kind of wet in there. And then in here too, we'll have, actually, I'm just going to put more yellow. I'm looking for differences in value. And if this one is a lighter color, like the light green that I see here, then this changes to a little bit more subdued, neutralized color. And this is just a bit deeper, darker. So I'm just playing with value shifts and also with warm and cool. This is warm and this is cool. All right. Now in here, there's not a lot that I want to do other than maybe do some of those ghost trees, right? And let's try a ghost tree on the side here. There's a little one. It's very light. So if I did one of these down here, because we know there's a couple of those on our picture, let's just do one here like this, and another one like this. They're far away, they're small, they're just not as strong as the ones in the front, but they also reflect more light, so they'll be, you know, I can put them with a bit of yellow, and that looks right. In here now, we need to do some defining of these shapes here. And when I, again, now this time I'm going to look at the picture, but the thing is that we had here was basically some shape going into the foreground like this. And what we have here is colors. I'm going to add a bit of blue in here. It's going to be pretty strong. Maybe more red as well. I want that violet, a nice blue violet. Let's try that. Lots of blue, lots of red. It's going to be very dark. I'm also going to use this color on the trunk afterwards, but not too strong on the brush. So let's try this first. Okay, and not too much water. But this gives me a little bit of, it's like the gray that I need to really make that contrast. And it's a good idea to soften some of these little areas. And if I look at the picture, it's much darker in here anyways. So let's just grab some of that bluey gray. Blue gray. I'm going to put some yellow in here. I've got green. See if I can get a gray. This is basically a nice neutral gray. And then and I'm really just looking for, again, it's that contrast. What I want in here are going to be some neutral greens. Now, with my brush, I can pick up some of the excess color so I can still see what was underneath. I don't want anything too light there. Okay. On the picture, what we see is a lot of linear effect. So let's grab some of this and see if we can make some of those lines. Up here we can do that because everything is going to be, it's closer to us, so it's more defined. So we can start putting some textured areas here. And you can also use your brush to wash some of that out so that it's not all exactly the same. And this, when I look at the tree, it has a shadow going over top of these shapes. So I'm using exactly that same gray to just go over in here and add a little bit of shadow. Not everywhere, but softening. Soft colors at this point. Very careful not to put too much because we don't want to lose our path going into the distance. Maybe a little bit more orange stuff in here. And you can see that by doing that texture, just holding your brush on the edge, on the side like this, gives us a little bit of that forced texture. And that'll be it for that. We can add more later to make some of these areas a bit darker, but we don't need to do that right now. Now this has to dry, and we'll come back and we'll touch up the trees, do a little bit of detailed work for the leaves and stuff like that, and that'll be pretty much it. Okay, let's keep going. Now I'm back with continuing on the next layer, and what I want to do next is basically go back into the trees and just make them a little bit darker. So I'll use my brush. There's a couple of ways I can do that. If I use my same mix that I had here earlier, which is that gray, I can get a lot of good strong color here, and that's just because there's a lot of blue in here. So I can go ahead and add a little bit more blue to some of these areas. And what I'm doing is just painting underneath the foliage. Looks more like a shadow, and I'm adding texture because it's just so much fun to do. Now, if you find the lines are too strong, I use this little brush here to soften edges. although it doesn't matter. It's a tree and there could be a lot of line in there. So I'm doing this now, and I know that I mentioned before that you could actually do exactly the same thing here without mixing your colors like that. If you prefer to use, for example, something like an indigo or a sepia, this is a good time to go ahead and do that if you want the strength of those colors. Now let me show you what an indigo will do. I'll put it over here. Doesn't need too much. Indigo is it's a great color, but it's almost like a black, right? So if you feel the need to put something like that somewhere, well, let's look in the picture here. There's, if anything, maybe in here. Now, when I use these strong colors, I make sure that I have water first because if it doesn't move, you're going to have these very strong lines that you may not like. And so I don't recommend using these unless you are having a lot of trouble mixing those blue airy colors like I showed by using the 3 primaries. But I know sometimes it's difficult to kind of mix the color you want. So it's fun to have the option of picking a color, a pure color, that already has a lot of strengths. So I'm just adding some of that blue. What I find is that when we do this, we tend to lose the harmony of the painting somewhat, because now I've introduced basically a new shade. And if I only have it in one spot, it won't look right. So you'll need to introduce it in more areas than one. Now, I can't really use it in here because that's really not going to be as dark as here. So if anything, here I'm going to use my gray. And here also, because I don't want these to stand out too much. Okay. And then what's missing here is the possibility of some branches. So I'll grab some of those darks, but I do want to have a little bit of red and yellow in there to get more brown. Now I know that in the picture we have a, maybe something like this over here. Right, use your brush to hold it straight up like this, and then moving across. I feel like the colors in here are not showing me enough of where the trunk edge is on this side, so I'll just move a little bit more in here, and then maybe add some more stuff here. All right. We have to make sure that these meet this little line here will meet the line below. Our eye follows that. Our eyes are very, very sharp when it comes to stuff like that. If this is over here and this is over here, then it's like, ooh, those two lines would not connect in real time. So it'll look odd. All right. Now, what I don't really have here is a good definition of the side of this trunk, because there's some darkness in here, which I don't mind, but I just have to do something here to show that continuity. again, lead the eye down. And at the back, because it's foliage of trees and tree shapes and stuff like that, I'll just reinforce that with a little bit of green. And that little bit of green can come to the other side. Now it looks like it goes right across. And by doing so, I kind of identified another tree here. So let's call it out. It's in the distance. It's a ghost tree. And it has its own little shape for leaves and stuff. And I'm not even going to touch that anymore. The back here, just to make that continue into the distance, I can add some of that in here. And it's very light. These are ghost shrubs, by the way. Now, I do feel like I need something in here. It needs to get darker below the base. And we do need to probably just texturize a little bit of something in here. We are very close now. The viewer is very close over here. And what we could do is, I think I had a little brush here that I could use. Well, something like this, an angular or angle brush. And if you feel like trying something like this, I'm going to grab make some green, but not a really bright green. And this, these shapes are going to be in here. And so I'm just putting in something like this. This is pretty much the only place where you would have some very strong color with texture like that. That's not going to happen in the distance. And I'm going to smooth that out. This is the corner, and the corners are usually not the interesting areas of a painting. And so we try not to call out too much details in here. Now, of course, as we go down over here, any kind of little details like that would start to disappear. Okay. All right. So let's grab my rigger and I'll put a couple more shapes in here. Let me see here, maybe up here, coming from the top. And how about from this one here? All right, now we've got lots. That's a lot. And it's starting to look cluttered. So let me grab some of that green and just add a bit more foliage here. Again, corners, we make them disappear somewhat. And now we look like, it looks like we have some little leafy stuff happening. They don't all have to have it. And it doesn't have to be super bright. But what we're doing here is just adding a little bit of that texture that we're always so anxious to put in. And it becomes tricky because we still don't want to put too much. And so it's like, where do you stop? Well, you stop wherever you feel you've done enough. I'm going to darken this a bit because I do like that shape in the background and I want it to be called out more. And it's a similar color, so it helps to unify that. The colors in here, maybe we can, again, just dirty that up a little bit. Add some texture. And in here, we said that there was the option to add a bit more darkness. So I'm using the blue and the red. My paint is a little bit thicker, and I'm going to just draw a couple of shapes which give definition to the path, shadow, and we can continue that over here. And then this area here is pretty rough, so that's really what it's going to be, a little on the rougher side. And what I mean by that is that I do want some texture here, so it's not all perfectly even. Bit of blue and red again for that purple. This is giving me a really good color for and if I used my liner here, I could get some of those lines in there as well. And as we get beyond this area, we don't have any lines anymore. It's just little dots. And for this part, just a couple little dark areas to show the contrast. This is very light. I don't mind leaving it like that, but I feel like it needs some color on this side. So I'm going to grab some red and yellow. That's the color of the original tree pretty much when we started putting in some of that brownish color that we put in. So it's really just to give it a little bit more shape here, a little bit more form. And this part here, there's a lot more gray in here. So this is not as bright as what the picture shows us. So let's grab some of that color in here. It has a bit of orange. It looks to me like it would have been like from the very first colors that we started with. I like that brown. But let's just add more color here, just so that there isn't as much separation between the tree and the bottom on the path. Just blending those two areas together to make it look more unified. And if that's not enough, at the next layer, if I do another layer, I could actually add some of that. And maybe is a good time to add some of my indigo with red, which is that beautiful purple that's great for shadows. All right, just to get things darker on this side of it. That's all it was for. And now we see that continuity here with the path starting up here. Just a bit more shadows coming in here with less shadows, less texture, and going into the distance, which is very light, the lightest area pretty much, other than the light coming down on the path. And the trees are very subdued. They look far. The tree trunk at the front is strong, has a lot of pigment on it. There's some white here. We could maybe decide later, do we want to keep that there? And once it's dry, I might decide that I want to make this area even a bit darker. This is wet, so can't do anything, but this could get maybe just a tiny little bit darker, not a lot. And then the tree itself up here, probably not a lot of changes there, unless there's something that looks odd. But in terms of the leafy shapes, you can add some deeper colors there too. But basically just at the end of the branches, you can go ahead and add some deeper colors. Deeper greens. And it's easy to get carried away with this one because it's so much fun to do details. All right, so I'm going to stop here. I've added a few more touch-ups actually, so I'm going to add this as the last thing. But what I've done here is I've used my little sort of roundish brush here, and I've added some little leaf shapes just because the branches looked like they were sort of bare. So I've gone ahead and done a couple, and here's how I'm doing them. I'm just touching the tip of the branch, and I'm adding a little shape of green. And this helps to give the illusion of leaves and shapes that are in the tree and hanging from those branches. Otherwise, it looks kind of weird. And the other thing that I've done is I straightened out this little path here, the end of this, just because there was a little hump here. And all I did was add a little bit of color over here on the line to make it straight as opposed to a bump. And the other thing that I want to do, and that's why I decided to continue this video till this end, I really did want to add some of the texture here at the base of the tree. So all I want to do here is add something like this, and it's touching parts of the tree, and it's also continuing off the paper basically, because it's all part of the shadows. So, and because it's in a corner, we don't want to show too much, but really all it's doing here is it's giving shadow to the trunk area of this painting, the trunk of this particular tree. And then in here we can add a little bit more if we want to, but it's really at the base of the tree that I thought it needed more. Other than that, there is, like I said, a little bit more texture now in terms of the leaves, leaf shapes, and maybe that's too much already. We probably didn't need that, so if you want to leave them out, that's perfectly fine. The tree area here, we fixed that. That's pretty much it. Just maybe define a little bit of that color in here, just to make it a little bit darker. And in terms of my ghost shapes, I'll just do them a slight bit greener. Maybe this one a little bit darker because it's behind. And we'll just color that in a bit because it's close to the edge. And up here. Now there was a separation in here, but I did not show that on this side. So I feel like I'm missing something here. Right on here, this tree is separated. So now I see the distinctive shape, separated shape. And it's really just to help me visualize what's happening at the top of the painting here. Darker, and we can go to that really dark area here. Make the corners darker. That one's okay. It's the distance. It's also where the light is. Okay, so all this gets a bit darker. More foliage. This could be a bit greener. So basically what we're doing here is adding a little bit of texture within these green spaces. Okay. And that's going to be it. Let's get that dark in here. Okay. Where the tree grows together, we're going to unify that a bit more. Okay. All right, so we'll stop here. Thank you for watching.